Over the course of the last year or so, I've talked at length about Dying Light and its sequel, Stay Human. The entire Dying Light franchise has been a personal favorite of mine since I played the original all those years ago. These are games that emphasize player freedom over everything. Not quite to the same level as something like an immersive sim, but as far as open world type games go, these games are up there. One would think that these games would become tiresome after a while, because a decade ago the phrase open world and zombie game coming together would create a hot trash fire, but these games wrap themselves in this familiarity that allows the player to quickly get in the flow of things. It's derivative with a purpose, which is a weird way to put it, especially because the familiar nature isn't what brings these games down. The shortcomings of both these games have always been stuff like the narrative. It's not something that I care a whole lot about. I complained about both of them in those previous videos, but this was more out of frustration in how the games constantly wanted to show the player this big, fancy narrative they cooked up, but it never turned out to be good, even with a few exceptional moments scattered throughout. Aside from those lackluster narratives, however, I always look forward to more Dying Light, which is why The Beast was one of my most anticipated titles of the year. Originally, this was supposed to be an expansion for Dying Light 2 that was roughly the size of The Following from the first game, and you can tell that was the goal when creating not just the world map, but the entire flow of the game. Dying Light the Beast is a more precise, more streamlined experience. It cuts out the fat and creates a world where instead of the prey to predator experience developing throughout the entire narrative, it can flip at a moment's notice. You can go from predator to prey in a moment's notice or vice versa because the world is so meticulously designed and it relies on you to utilize the sandbox to make sure those tables don't turn on you. The best part about the game being so precise and slimming itself down is the fact that the best aspects of the game are that much higher, while the weakest aspects of the game aren't that bad this time around. It's nothing mind-blowing, but what's on the table from, say, the narrative is exactly what I asked for back in the first Dying Light. More 28 Days Later than World War Z. No big Hollywood explosive narrative. Everything is precise and compact. Dying Light the Beast is exactly what I've been asking for as a fan. I was honestly amazed at what Dying Light the Beast was offering me. I thought it would be more Dying Light, when in reality, it's not just that, it's better Dying Light. But that made me pose a question. How does this game fit in as a sequel? It's a relatively stupid question on the surface, because it's the third game, but this game started with a small origin that blossomed into something larger, something greater, but this isn't technically Dying Light 3. At least, that's what I gathered from the lack of a number and the fact that the marketing has it labeled as a spin-off. But as of late, the creatives surrounding this game have said for all intents and purposes, this is Dying Light 3. So, where does the game fit in? Sequel, spin-off, is it both? Is it neither? How does it work in relation to the other two games? That's what's interesting to me. But before I start, I'm going to issue a spoiler warning if you actually care about the story of this game, since I will be spoiling it. Anyways, if you like what I do, please consider liking, commenting, subscribing, all that jazz. I do have a Patreon, more about that at the end of the video. But with that out of the way, this is an examination of Dying Light the Beast and how it fits in as a sequel. The game cold opens in a laboratory. Kyle Crane, the protagonist from Dying Light, has been experimented on for the last 13 years, because at the end of that game's expansion, The Following, Kyle Crane had become a half-human, half-volatile hybrid. The laboratory is run by one Dr. Marius Fisher, simply referred to as the Baron, with the goal of creating a new stage in human evolution by messing around with the genes of not just Crane, but other human volatile hybrids. To me, the Baron feels like a way for the game to signal to the player that it's trying to right the wrongs of Dying Light 2 in a way, or at least show that they can do this half-competently this time. I remember saying to myself, oh, we're doing evil scientists again? But unlike Waltz in Stay Human, the Baron isn't just forgotten about at various points in the plot. He feels like some sort of looming threat, and again, unlike Waltz, your reason for revenge is a lot simpler. Instead of taking somebody that your character cares about that you don't know, Fisher was torturing Kyle, a character that you care about in a way because he was the player character of the first game. But moving away from Kyle for just a second, I want to talk about the Baron, since he is a very Resident Evil coded villain, and I like him for that. He's mischievous, and he wants to forward evolution with genetic manipulation, much like Oswald Spencer, and everything Umbrella does throughout the games. The Resident Evil comparison feels right to me, considering just how much inspiration carries on through the rest of the game. I'll get to the gameplay in a bit here, but during a developer interview, franchise director Timon Smektala, I probably butchered the hell out of that, brought up Resident Evil as one of the top other zombie games and how it was hard to beat Resident Evil. He also brought up how the game has survival horror elements to it, which I disagree with, but regardless, it leads me to believe that the Baron was purposely made like a villain from Resident Evil. And I think the game is all the better for that. He is a lot of fun to watch throughout the various points of the campaign, even though, much like a Far Cry villain, he's not really in the campaign a whole lot. While I disagree with the survival horror comparison, there's actually another parallel between Dying Light and Resident Evil, and that lies within how they change and rebound their own formulas. Where Dying Light strayed a little too far for some people's comfort and reeled it in with the third game, Resident Evil experiences something similar throughout its lifespan. We can see this throughout the multiple genre shifts it's experienced, changing up its formula for better and for worse. Following the success of Resident Evil 4, the series took a large swing away from classic survival horror until they eventually went too far into action for some people, and so they soft rebooted the formula with Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Dying Light experienced something like that, but on a much smaller scale. In an interview with MMORPG.com, Smectella said, quote, "The main learning from Dying Light 2 was that it was very easy to lose the essence of the series when changing up the formula. We need to strike a careful balance between satisfaction and challenge. So, what does that mean? If you see even just one zombie in front of you, it needs to be a challenge. If you go out at night, you need to feel scared. You need to feel that you are being hunted. You need to feel that it's dark. The only thing that you can trust is your flashlight and your wits." End quote. Much like when Resident Evil had flown too close to the sun, Dying Light 2 had turned some people away, and Techland wanted to refocus when creating this game, hence the move from DLC to full-blown release. Understanding the large wave of disappointment that initially came with Dying Light 2 is also important to understand the wider context of Dying Light the Beast. When the game released, it had changed a lot from the formula established by the first game. It had become less sandbox and more RPG. To me, and a few other people, the core of what made the game was still there, just buried underneath the ambitious yet underwhelming design choices, and it wouldn't be for another year or two, after a lot of post-launch support, where Stay Human would resemble something similar to that first game. That's why I think the introduction for the Beast feels like the game is deliberately stopping you and telling you that Techland listened and learned, and now you have something more in line with what you expected from a Dying Light sequel. The narrative for both games is that you were experimented on by some evil scientist and now you're on your way to get revenge. Both games have it for different reasons, but it's broadly very similar. After you escape the lab with the help of a mysterious person named Olivia, your escape leads you into a town, and this portion also reminds me of Dying Light 2's introduction, where that game took a while to actually get started with the prologue lasting about 2 hours. This game is very snappy with its pacing. By the end of the first hour, we've re-established Kyle Crane as the player character and how he's changed over these last 13 years. We see the friendly relationship between him and Olivia start to blossom, and during that first hour, we fight one of the bosses called Chimeras. Chimeras are bosses that appear throughout the story that allow you to amplify your beast moveset. They'll allow you to do things like pick up heavier objects, activate the beast on command, pull on your grapple. Mainly just additional things, nothing game-changing. Inside of that first hour, you're also introduced to all your crafting, armor, and workbench systems. The fact that the game is so snappy with its pacing directly feels like a response to Dying Light 2 and its prolonged intro that they literally let you skip. The game is purposely getting out of your way to let you actually play the game, and that mentality stretches throughout the entire game. The game retains a leveling system in line with Dying Light 2 where the areas have levels, but it never feels like the leveled areas got in my way of exploration. The only time I ever felt affected by the leveled areas was when I got to one area on the map ranked level 11. That was the endgame area where one of the final missions took place. I got in there at like level 7 and I was annihilated instantly, so I just didn't go back. I'm usually not a fan of leveled areas in games like this just because it does hinder that exploration aspect that they pride themselves on having, but the Beast, like I said, is pretty good about the levels. You never feel too over-leveled, barring that one example. One last note I want to talk about with the introduction is a very interesting design choice to me. Throughout the first Dying Light and its sequel, almost all of the game takes place in a first-person perspective, including cutscenes. There were a few exceptions, but for the most part you never left the perspective of the player character. That allows you to fall into this sense of immersion. In Dying Light the Beast, however, this changes. A lot of the cutscenes in the game leave that first-person perspective. We see Crane a lot more often from a different camera angle, and this contributes to the feeling of him feeling like a character separate from the player, but you lose that sense of immersion. A large portion of my narrative problems with the other two games was that, because of some external factor, the characters never really felt like characters. This wasn't exclusive to the player character, but especially your character in both games just kind of felt like a guy with nothing more to him. Here, Kyle Crane has some development. The game feels comfortable with him being his own character and having to make his own decisions, and it's nice. It's nice to have that for once in one of these games. In my opinion, the writing here is better across the board for the most part. I actually have a reason to care about a lot of the characters, even if it is a surface level reason. Most of the characters aren't irrational, nor do they just feel like plot devices, with a few exceptions that I'll get to. The game takes smaller moments that I liked from the other two games and extends that to the main cast, so the entire game has this more personal feeling to it. Since your cast remains pretty small throughout most of the runtime, the characters don't really just come and go like they did in Stay Human. Instead, it feels more like The Following from the first game. The cast really only grows in the third act when all the pieces come together, but the third act is also where the game suffers the most narratively, since it's the same shortcoming of those other two games, where the wicked fast pacing comes to bite the game in the ass because it needs to wrap itself up, and that's kind of amplified here due to the short runtime of this game, but I'll get to that later. The game manages to fit a lot in that first hour or so, and that is because the game is the shortest entry to date, like I mentioned. So, it has to be a lot snappier to decide what is and is not important to show the player. Despite The Beast being the shortest game in the series, I still spent quite a bit of time in the world. Castor Woods is such a fun location to not only explore, but it's the ultimate representation of the game as a whole in my eyes. In an interview with GameRant.com, Smectala stated, quote, "We made sure Castor Woods feels lively and like a lived-in ecosystem by fully unleashing the creativity and talent of our artists. We gave our team just one direction: go through each and every square inch of the map and make sure it feels unique, handcrafted, and lived in," end quote. Oftentimes, the phrase lived in is just thrown around to try and sell an open world, even when it's lifeless and dull. A world being lived in isn't enough. I can tell people used to live here and now they don't. That much is obvious. I need more. But it just so happens that Techland are actually masters of making worlds feel actually lived in. The general aesthetic of Castor Woods is great, but every square inch of the map does feel like a person was once there. You can see this from the Old Town, you can see this from the residential area, you can see this in the industrial area. Every area in the game feels like a person was working there or living there. In that same interview with Game Rant, Smectala stated, quote, "What makes it really unique is the number of real-life objects that were added and rendered into the game. A good example is the lion-themed blanket that you see in the safe zone in gameplay. It's a real-life item that belongs to Katarzyna's grandmother, and there are plenty of little stories like that in the environment, and these human touches really make Castor Woods stand out," end quote. That's the strength of the map. It feels like an actual place, much like Haran from the first game. The map of the sequel felt a little too good to be true in a way. Despite the wonderful art direction, Villador or the Loop never quite felt lived in the same way that Haran and the Old Town did in the first game. The little touches that are spread across the map give it a feeling of actuality, of legitimacy, and that's something I think is missing from a lot of other open world games that Dying Light as a franchise delivers on most of the time. Castor Woods as a location is everything that has come before in Dying Light. There are grassy hillsides, a little industrial section, the Old Town, not the same one from the first game, but still, the mental asylum in the middle of the map, and the residential neighborhood. Each one of these areas bring to them a different flow of combat and parkour, which changes up how you play. For example, the grappling hook is best used in the Old Town, as there are tall buildings and constant structures in between to utilize your grappling hook. It's also the most compact area, allowing for nighttime escapes from volatiles with relative ease. The countryside, however, is best traversed with a car, much like in The Following. The challenge of traversing the countryside comes in the challenge of maintaining your truck. Not just its fuel, but its health, too. If you hit too many zombies or things in the world, your truck takes damage, obviously. If a zombie grabs on the back of the truck, you have to smash into a wall to fling the zombie off, causing damage. If a hazmat zombie explodes, damage. It's all a nice balancing act. So, unlike The Following, your car isn't quite an extension of you. It's more like a tool. Back in that expansion, the car was upgradable, eventually becoming as strong as the player, but not here. There's really only one or two truck upgrades in the skill tree, and it's better fuel and health usage. Nothing too outrageous. Techland struck a good balance between on-foot traversal and traversal within the vehicles. There is never a moment where I felt as though one was always better than the other. It felt situational and up to me to decide when and where I wanted to use that. And that freedom is core to Dying Light. It's small choices like that that add up over an experience that allow the game to stand out from its competition. Dying Light also stands out from the competition by the way of side content, and what I mean is that across all the games, the side content has always been good if not better than the main plot at times, and here it's no different. In my 25 or so hours with the game, a lot of what I did was side content, and I didn't even do everything. Since the Beast is very interested in continuing the best aspects of both games, the side content on offering here is honestly impressive for how consistently good a lot of it is. The side characters themselves are forgettable mostly in namesake, but while you're immersed in the world, stopping to solve their problems and help them out is always a lot of fun. You get these interesting side quests that at times have surprising amounts of production value to them. At one point early on in the game, after you re-establish the town hall, a character has a quest for you. Their dad has dementia and has been wandering off. This time, he hasn't returned in a while, so he asked you to go find him. After searching his last known whereabouts, you finally come across him in a cave, and he believes that you're his son. After either arguing with him or just going with the story, William, the father, will tell you that you need to finish what he started, and that he set up explosives around the cave to kill all the infected inside. All you have to do is connect the bombs and return to William, but it's actually a little difficult because it's a viral nest, so if you get detected, it's more or less back to the start. And once you get all the explosives rigged, William tells you that he's sorry and blows up the explosives, killing himself. All things considered, it's actually a pretty short quest, but talking to William and learning about what happened with his past and seeing him confused just strikes a nerve that made the quest stick in my brain, honestly a little more than the main quest did. The same could be said about Starchild's quest lines, for example. He has a couple quests throughout the game where they explore Kyle Crane as a character. We see his internal struggles played out, and in one quest he quite literally goes in his head and beats up primal versions of himself. I didn't say these quests were subtle. It's in these side quests that I find the narrative to be most interesting because it focuses on things that I actually kind of am interested in. They examine things like the virus itself, how it affects people, and they examine Kyle Crane as a character, and that's what I want out of these games. Small, personable stories that may not be the most subtle or even stand out on a larger scale, but they're stories that make you feel something in the moment other than the boredom that comes around like clockwork when I do side quests in any other open world game. Perhaps I'm playing favorites or I'm being unfair here, but to me, it's a strange inverse. A lot of the time, what holds these massive open world games together is their narrative. The foundational glue at the center of a game like Ghost of Tsushima is the spectacle the main narrative places upon itself. The open world filler stuff is there to pad for time and make everything seem that much more like an adventure. When you're gathering an army to save your uncle from the Mongols, it's a lot more impressive if you actually cross the continent and go to everyone and do their associated quests, and then move off into the wind and go to the next person, compared to just being level to level linear sequences. It's why companies like Ubisoft have this formula down to a science. Players love engaging with the world to amplify the narrative, but Dying Light, at least to me, is less about the main story and more about the side stuff, the world design, and getting lost, almost like a Bethesda game. If I go back to what I said in my Dying Light 2 video, the game feels like Skyrim at times when you just get lost in the world, and the same thing applies to both the first game, the second game, and this game. I've said it time and time again, I don't care about the story of these Dying Light games. I think they're all mediocre to bad. It's fun to talk about them and look at them as if they were being serious, but to me, they're not. Okay, that was a bit hyperbolic. I think they're just alright for the most part. I think Dying Light 2 actually has a bad narrative, but the other two games are just fine. I love the Resident Evil isms in this game spread throughout with the genetic modification stuff in the beginning, and I love the homages to movies like 28 Days Later that are a constant across this franchise, but I can never bring myself to actually care about the main cast or the larger unfolding plot. It's why I was a little confused when they announced Dying Light the Beast, because they did this whole thing where they announced Kyle Crane would be making his glorious return, which, sure, I love me some Roger Craig Smith, but Kyle Crane was never really that interesting of a character to me, so to warrant bringing him back, it seemed a little confusing. At least this time he had an interesting volatile twist to go along with it. But believe it or not, Kyle Crane being part volatile isn't actually all too important to this game's plot. It's the catalyst of the plot, but the game is about two things, the Baron and the Beast. Except you aren't the Beast. It's a double entendre in the title because you have your name as the Beast, that is your beast mode power, but the Beast is a separate character who I will get to here in a bit. Unlike the Disney movie of a similar name, this isn't a love story, it's just an excuse to have another outing with my good buddy Kyle Crane. Early on in the game, we meet some people in the central town hall, overseen by somebody named the Sheriff. She exists solely to betray you later on, but the people in the actual town hall remind me of the people in the tower from the first game. They don't do much or do anything really. They'll throw you the occasional side quest, and there's a vendor that sells hot dog shit, but they're a reminder to Crane that it's about helping out the little guy. And now it's especially true given the fact that he is literally a superhero. He has these beast powers. He goes beast mode. But the town hall more or less gets thrown away come the halfway point when the sheriff betrays you. She informs you that the Baron is overseeing an operation at the mine, so you make an attempt to kill him. However, since the sheriff betrays Crane and hands him over to the Baron, the Beast, who was the real reason for the Baron being at the mine, interferes and manages to escape. And yes, it does happen almost as fast as I described it. You're then given the location of a group of infected subjects like Crane who are looking to enhance their telepathy in order to control infected. So, you capture a scientist to help out with that. And then, after enhancing the group's telepathy, you decide to spring a trap in order to get the Beast on your side, since the Baron is in hiding, and the only way to get him out of hiding is to get the Beast. You know, maybe it actually is a love story. You beat the shit out of him, and then you return him to human form, and then you learn that it was actually Aiden, the protagonist from Dying Light 2's Stay Human. I'm not sure if this was something I was supposed to predict or not based on the few looks of the Beast we get throughout, but part of me wants to recognize it as some sort of witty meta humor about how all the protagonists just kind of look like some guy. I don't believe that was the intention, rather I just completely forgot about Aiden Babaden, but still. After capturing Aiden, you learn how this all comes full circle back around to Dying Light 2. At some point, Aiden and Spike learned of Kyle being held captive and wanted to go rescue him, but obviously that didn't succeed. It resulted in Spike being captured and Aiden being turned into the titular Beast. But now, with the two protagonists together, everyone plans an assault on the castle where the Baron resides. Again, a very Resident Evil coded thing of him to do. But before I get to the assault on the castle, I want to talk about just the general gameplay of the Beast, since it's genuinely some of the best that the series has had up to this point. Earlier this year saw the release of the film 28 Years Later. The movie follows a group of secluded Scottish people following the outbreak that cut the UK off from the rest of the world in 28 days later. In the movie, we see just how dangerous an infection like this could be. Even a group of sluggish biters are treated as life or death, and the characters take plenty of precautions when it comes to dealing with the infected. Many of the action scenes throughout the movie are great at displaying the danger of the infected, just how fast they are, how sporadic they can act. It's a fantastic film, one of the best of the year. It completely subverted my expectations in just how sincere the movie actually ended up being in its depiction of a coming-of-age story, but my reason for bringing up 28 Years Later, other than to just gush about the movie, was the fact that I think the movie parallels Dying Light in quite a few ways. This one isn't exclusive to 28 Years Later, but it's one of those zombie media things that really puts attention to detail in how the zombies operate. Because they aren't technically zombies, much like Dying Light, they're infected. They aren't just mindless husks of creatures. They don't just shuffle over to noise, but they react in ways that make them feel like horrifying beasts. This one is a little more specific to the film, and it does remind me a lot of Dying Light. It's that people aren't allowed to go out during the night. This is for two reasons. One reason is that the island that they're based on has a natural land bridge that goes away once the tides rise at night, meaning you have to stay out the entire night if you miss that bridge cutoff. And secondly, this is because we see infected during the night are just as, if not more dangerous during the night. They act more feral during the night, and because you can't really see during the night, they're a lot more dangerous. There's a few scenes in the film that highlight this. The fact that there's no civilization means that there's no light pollution, so it genuinely is pitch black, and you genuinely have trouble seeing things during the film. Or maybe that's just how the film was projected at my theater. But still, it was terrifying watching it the first time through. Much like 28 Years Later, Dying Light the Beast excels at this horror atmosphere. The daytime is just a tad bit unsettling, it's a little too quiet, and a horde of roaming infected could easily take you out on the hardest difficulty. But it's really the nights where the game's horror shines. Dying Light 2 received a lot of criticism at launch for how it handled the day-night cycles. In that game, it was humans during the day and infected at night. On paper, this was a neat enough concept, but in execution, it just left the daytime feeling a bit empty, and the nights weren't filled with enough horror as it was very hard to get a volatile chase going. This problem was eventually somewhat remedied during one of the many post-launch updates, but it was never really solved to the fullest extent. The Beast, on the other hand, brings the horror back to the nights. It is pitch black outside, and without your flashlight, you cannot see anything. Chases start all too often, and if you get caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, it could easily spell a quick death for you. A volatile chase was a lot of fun, but also something that I wanted to avoid as much as possible, especially when I was in the countryside before unlocking my grappling hook. The volatiles hurt like hell and will spring on you, and if you dare try and look back to stun the volatile, it's just as likely a viral or just a shambles gambler will grab you and cause you to die. It's this endless balancing act that makes you fucking terrified. The volatiles in this game are so scary that at one point I had a glitch occur where they showed up during the daytime and it caused a chase, but even though it was bright outside, I was still utterly terrified.
The existential narcissist is what they call me. That's
Hey, why is there
existential gamer narcissist.
What the fuck? Why is there a volatile in broad day? No one involved!
What? Is there wolf? Dang!
No one they fucking evolved!
The volatiles evolved?
I'm being chased by a volatile in broad daylight! I'm no fucking
You're stronger now.
The knee slapper. I said evolvatile. That
Oh,
sounds
I'm
more
alive!
like
I'm alive!
that's probably what.
Oh, my game was bugged, that's why! Nighttime exploration still provides the same double XP benefit as the other games, but where in the first game and the second game I was more than able to do my objectives during the night to help level, the streamlined progression of the beast allows the game to crank the horror way up. I found myself not really exploring at night nearly as much because of just how terrifying it was to go out at night. Looking back on the first game, it was relatively easy to go out at night. With the way experience and levels worked in the first two games, it was very beneficial to do stuff at night since chases didn't start all too often, and early on you had a myriad of ways to escape a volatile chase or find a momentary safety. In this game, however, you don't have as many tools to help you out, and the areas are much wider, meaning chases start more frequently, and you have less access to safety and tools. The atmosphere extends throughout more than just the nighttime exploration. The way the sun beams down during the day leaves the environment feel almost dry at times, with nothing but a crisp wind to break the sounds of infected shambles. Then, when dusk arrives, you see the sky turn golden, and all the infected stop and turn away to look at the setting sun before darkness arrives. The game works overtime to constantly give you something new to feel when exploring, since you'll probably be doing that more than anything else. Dying Light is renowned for its parkour. The whole selling point of the original title was Far Cry with zombies and Mirror's Edge. The sequel changed how a lot of the parkour systems interacted with the world by changing the stamina system and the speed at which you interacted with climbable objects. This meant that Aiden, the protagonist, was floaty and it allowed you to pull off some weird tricks, but people weren't really a fan of how it felt. So, Dying Light the Beast continues its job of more or less acting like a pseudo-proper sequel to the original by working with the newer systems introduced in Stay Human and modifying them ever so slightly to give it a more classic feel. One system that they did tweak was the stamina system. At some point before this game came out, Techland added an update to Stay Human that allowed players to use a stamina system in line with the first Dying Light, where stamina didn't deplete unless doing something like a jump. It's one of those changes that I actually wasn't a fan of because while it's more options for more fun, I think it breaks the balance of that game since a lot of its challenges and whatnot were designed around that stamina limitation. The Beast uses that updated stamina system here, and obviously it's a lot better implemented on the sole basis that the game was designed around it. In its original implementation in Dying Light 2, you had to complete the prologue with the original stamina system because of how it was designed, but after that, you could use it however you pleased. The stamina balance in The Beast is a lot better because unlike Stay Human, this game doesn't feel like too much or too little. You never quite have enough stamina when you're fighting, and I think that's a good thing. Not being able to just go on the offense whenever gives the game a heightened sense of challenge. You have to think about your surroundings, especially when fighting humans, since one stray grab from a zombie could result in your death. The feeling of never having enough stamina can be frustrating though, especially when it comes to the bosses, since I think they aren't the best design-wise, which can result in some rather annoying moments. Throughout the game, you'll fight an assortment of bosses, and almost all of them are a variation of a special zombie, but with a larger health bar. On hard mode, they do the same amount of damage as their normal counterparts, but they take longer to kill. Typically, in a game like this, you would fight the boss enemy first, and then in order to show the player's progression, you would fight the boss enemy again as a normal enemy later on. Dying Light, the original, did that, but here, it does the opposite. More often than not, this resulted in me becoming annoyed with the bosses, especially the big brute archetypes that you have to fight a few times, especially towards the end when they throw like 2 or 3 in the arena with you, because of just how much damage they do, and annoying stuff like the tracking on their rock throws and their ground slams items, and all the stuff. That mixed with the healing economy on hard mode made for some frustrating periods of time. On the whole, however, combat is better across the board compared to Stay Human. There was never a time where it felt as though I was smacking an enemy with a pool noodle, big bosses aside. It was a nice mix of how the original game felt and the improvements of the second game's combat. The game also managed to do something that I thought would never happen, and that is a good balance of guns. That's right, I didn't forget about it. Guns are back and they're on my bitch list. Not really. In both videos talking about Dying Light and its sequel, I riffed on the fact that in those games, the guns were unbalanced and a mess. They didn't feel particularly good to shoot, and they detracted from the experience. The first game in particular, because once you acquire the double-barrel shotgun, combat became trivial since ammo was plentiful. The sequel launched without guns, which was something that I enjoyed, but later added them in due to a mixture of backlash and requests from the community. They were an opt-in feature, however, so you could play the entire game and not see a gun for the most part until you complete the gun quest. But this threw off the balance for a large portion of the game since guns were never originally designed to be in the game. But again, it was an opt-in feature, so if you're like me, I played 99% of my playthrough of that game without guns, and I didn't notice a difference. My main reason for being so anti-gun in Dying Light is because they never really feel good. They don't feel better than the hand-to-hand combat, and you're more or less forced to use guns if the enemies have guns since they absolutely tear you up. The Beast fixes this. Sort of. The guns are actually balanced this time around. Humans carry guns from the start, so you almost always have access to them, but your accuracy is intentionally very wonky, so you end up wasting ammo. Ammo that is already rare in the game. That rarity of ammo means you have to better choose when to use your bullets, since most guns you'll find yourself are not full of ammo. They barely have any shots to kill a dozen guys. And by chance, if you do have a gun with a lot of ammo, the accuracy is probably very bad on it, or the range isn't very good. Those drawbacks of the guns, plus the fact that killing enemies with a gun doesn't fill your beast mode meter, it helps balance the guns since oftentimes they can be overpowered. Speaking of beast mode, which, yes, I've had a smirk on my face every time I've read this line, the addition of beast mode is also a key feature as to why the balance works in this game. The other two games have never been afraid to throw a horde of zombies at you or give you a large shooting range or combat arena full of people, but in the Beast, the enemy count for both people and zombies has increased. Most encounters see you fighting a lot more zombies because now you can enter the Rage mode, which allows Kyle Crane to lift heavy shit and punch zombies right through their chest. What I find interesting about the feature is the fact that something like this would break the balance of gameplay in theory, but ultimately it doesn't since the bar doesn't fill up as fast as you think it would, and there's still an air of strategy to building up the meter before you actually unlock the win button, because as previously mentioned, ranged kills don't fill up the beast meter at all. You would think this incentivizes people to exclusively play up close and build up the meter, and it does to an extent, but that's where the trade-off for ranged kills comes in. Like I mentioned earlier, ranged kills don't build up your rage mode, so you could do an entire arena in stealth or in ranged and take less damage, but if you run out of ammo and need to go up close and personal, and you end up taking a lot of damage, you won't have that get out of jail free card, which is your built up beast meter. The addition of the rage meter mixed with the fact that guns actually aren't all too effective for killing zombies, especially big zombies, means that you're less likely to use the guns as a jack of all trades. Gunshots are just going to attract more zombies, but since they're not very good at killing zombies in the first place, it's like an endless loop. It was like this in the previous games, but ammo was so plentiful that you could just kill whatever you wanted without a care in the world. The lack of resources, at least on the hard mode, means that the game has an air of strategy to it. It makes it more fun to consider your options. Will you go loud and waste all your ammo, or will you try and use your bow to pick off somebody until you get caught, or will you just sneak around and stealth kill everyone with your hands? It all feeds into the sandbox loop that defines Dying Light as a franchise. Speaking of moments that define Dying Light, the climax of the narrative is strange, to say the least. During the final hour of the narrative, you storm the Baron's castle and eventually get captured, and when he does capture you, I kid you not, he takes everyone to a dinner table and does this over-the-top monologue where the Baron reveals that your escape from the start of the game was all orchestrated from the start, and Olivia was actually working for the Baron behind your back the whole time. She was a double agent. But then the Baron decides to kill Spike from the first game. I don't think Spike says anything. I think he has maybe 2 lines of dialogue. But regardless, he kills him in front of you and Aiden, and there's no real emotional stakes here. This character has been here from the start, and I genuinely felt nothing when he died. It was unceremonious to say the least. It feels like the game was trying to have its Negan moment from The Walking Dead, but instead it feels out of place with the clear Resident Evil isms the Baron has been showing the entire time. Tonally, I don't think it works either, because again, this just happens. Nothing in the game was building up to a moment like this. The game hasn't been particularly dark. It's not a game about loss. The closest we get is some side quests and small moments throughout where Crane reflects on Haran, but nothing major. There's no thematic weight to any of it, but I feel like that's the issue with following Kyle Crane after that first game. Everyone I love dies and it's all my fault isn't an uncommon narrative device. It's actually a pretty damn good one sometimes, especially in stories about larger-than-life individuals, but it doesn't really feel like the game is doing that here. Even just including a moment between Spike and Kyle right before the narrative climax would have helped out a lot with the weight of it all. But when Spike dies, that is the first time we see him in the game, like visually see him. But then, after Spike is killed, it's revealed that Olivia wasn't actually working for the Baron. Rather, she intended to double-cross him as revenge for her father. It's all just confusing. Not because what is being told to me isn't processing, but because it feels rather forced. And maybe that's due to the short runtime of the game, but nothing that happens here feels like it was really developed at all. Everything that happens here was brought up maybe once or twice. Well, everything except for the final boss. In classic Resident Evil fashion, you have a fight with the Baron where his final phase turns him into a big scary monster, and it's all a part of his plan for genetic evolution. This is humanity's final form or whatever. The fight itself is nothing special. It's fun, but the spectacle of it all is what helps distinguish it as a set piece. But once you kill him, the game rolls credits. That's it. You have some more GRE sequelties thrown in there at the very end, and it's interesting to think of how off the wall they could go with a sequel, but I wish there was a little more here. I sound like a broken record when I talk about the story, since it's clear that I'm not a big fan of it. I don't think they're very good, but the narrative blunders are why I love these games so much, though. Not for the mean reason of, oh, I can make fun of it, but the fact that there's clearly passion behind every aspect of these games, regardless of what I consider arbitrarily good or bad, is why these games stand out to me. And to move to the question of the video, it's why the game does work as a sequel. This is a full-blown sequel, not just to Dying Light, but to Dying Light and Stay Human. For all intents and purposes, I consider this the third game. What The Beast was meant to be was up in the air for a little bit before the game came out, considering its roots as an expansion, but despite what some people will tell you, this is a whole new experience. This is the best tendencies of Dying Light mixed with its classic narrative blunders thrown together into one compact 20-hour experience. If you don't believe me, believe the people who made the game. In an interview with Insider Gaming, Smectalis said, quote, "This is a new game. At some point, a few months ago, we basically started treating the Beast as the next entry in the Dying Light series. Maybe it doesn't have a 3 in it, but for us, it is Dying Light 3. We also realized that with all the experience we got from the first and second game, we can make the best Dying Light game we've ever done." End quote. The other day, as I was wrapping up my time with the game, a friend of the channel who isn't really into these games asked me a hard question. Would you recommend this game over the other two? In theory, it should be an easy question, because if what I said here is true, and I believe that this is the best of both games, I should recommend it over the other two, right? That's where I'm stuck, however, and that's where I got the main question of the video. Is Dying Light the Beast a sequel? For all intents and purposes, yes, it is. Actually, no, scrap that. Straight up. It just is a sequel. It takes the systems of the other games and learns what did and did not work, and it allows those systems to successfully breathe in what is possibly the best version of Dying Light there is. But I just can't bring myself to recommend it over the other two games because of just how much my personal enjoyment has come from watching these games evolve in both a narrative and gameplay sense. The weakest aspects of these games are still getting better game after game, and since this game works perfectly fine as a sequel, I wouldn't really recommend it over the other two games simply for the fact that I think each game has something so strong to bring to the core experience that the Beast then molds into a great experience that it doesn't make sense to start with the Beast. The Beast wasn't as experimental as Stay Human. It was meant to be a crowd pleaser, but in order for that crowd pleaser to properly work, I think it's important to have the essential background from the other two games so you can understand why there is even a crowd to please. And plus, in some aspects, I still kind of prefer Dying Light 1 more. But regardless of how likely I am to recommend it over whichever game I'm comparing it to, it's important to understand just how good the Beast really is. For a while, I thought the first game was lightning in a bottle. Techland made a game that was just too good for their own good, and after the release of the second game, that thought was more apparent since it seemed like they had flown too close to the sun in order to try and top what they were originally doing with that first game. And while there were some good aspects to that game that I liked, it really didn't hold a candle to the original. It wasn't even close, even after all the updates. But the Beast proved to me that the game wasn't lightning in a bottle. They are capable of topping the first game, as proven by this game. It may not have the same endgame and player longevity of that original game, but that's fine. Not every game needs that, and honestly, if Tekken continued putting out more compact and finely tuned experiences rather than trying to shoot for the stars, I don't think I would complain. So, to put it plain as day, Dying Light the Beast not only works as a spin-off / sequel, it works as a full-blown individual game. Some people will debate me on that because the game is too short for them, but 20 hours is plenty of time for a full-blown video game. This isn't an experience for just fans of the franchise, even though that's the target audience. This is the same fun that the first Dying Light brought all those years ago, put onto a fresh canvas with new ideas. These games are at their best when they know exactly what they are, and the Beast is all too confident in its ability to give you that dopamine rush of drop-kicking a zombie off the roof and making it go splat, while also making you go splat in your pants at night. Thanks for watching. Alright, if you made it to the end of the video, I just wanted to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It means so much to me. If you enjoy what I do, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Videos like this and future endeavors wouldn't be possible without the support of people like PogoShack. Pledging $5 or $10 a month gives you these videos early and ad-free. You'll get occasional behind-the-scenes looks and any future endeavors that won't go on the channel, as well as your name in the credits. But again, to anyone who made it this far, regardless, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.